That's
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Cactus Lounge. I am Donna Reed. I traveled in 1976 in Up With People. And today I have two young men with me also who traveled, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves. So, Paul, share who you are.
yeah. Hi, I'm Paul Conzemius. I traveled in Cast A 2008 as a student, and then I continued traveling as a staff member through 2014 A, I think.
That's a lot
I
of
think it's
years.
up after
Wow.
A. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. And Dave.
Hi, I'm Dave Penny. I traveled in CO7, and then I was on staff on the road, 08, 09, 10, and I went into the office in a hybrid role from 11 to 13.
Okay. So part of the reason, and I just have told these guys that the one that I just did with Phil Woods and with Caleb is because they are children of alumni. So we call them legacy children, and everybody's story related to how they came to Up With People is a little bit different. So Paul, I'll go back to you since you're the top one on my screen here. When did you first see an Up With People show? When do you remember seeing a show?
Well, I probably first saw an Up With People show in infancy, certainly. But I don't remember a show until I was maybe six. I
Okay.
think I remember being on stage for the taping of I think it was Rhythm of the World. I think that was the show where they had like a news broadcast set up, was like part of their staging for their show. And they had a bunch of kids on stage. And I just have a couple of glimpses and memories of that. And later learned that Michael Bowerman was the painter of the sky on
Oh,
stage at
funny.
that moment. And then I worked with him quite a bit later, which was fun connection later on. But that's the first one I remember. But I mean, it was until until I was seven. Both my parents worked for Up With People still, and my mom took me on the road when I learned how to walk on the road at a
Wow.
gas pickup in Australia. So I was around
All the
shows a
time.
whole bunch, but those are the ones that's when I remember it.
So a painter of the sky, is that the one that had the I am the king of lightning and thunder
I
and
think
all
so. Yeah. Yes.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They had like the characters, and I don't. I should have probably brushed up on that show a little more before this, but as a kid, that was my mental image was
That you
they
remember. You
had those
remember.
different characters, and they had kids play a role in the taping in the studio in Interlaken.
Oh,
Um,
okay. And
yeah.
and so you weren't, I go back originally, I would say to people, oh, where did you stage and where did you first see a show? And it was often like for me, it was in the hometown, the town where I went to high school. You guys, your lives are entirely different. So, Dave, what about you? What's the evolution of you seeing a show or having a memory of seeing a show?
Yeah, I don't know. I grew up both my dad was working for Up With People until I was in middle school, through halfway through middle school, I think. So I grew up at shows in Tucson all the time, and then we moved to Colorado and being backstage. So I remember running around, and Phil Woods mentioned it in the other podcast I was listening. But yeah, uh, the Shellsta kids, the Lane kids, Woods,
Yeah,
and myself just being backstage all the time and
yeah,
watching up in the rafters and watching up in the balcony. As soon as our parents would let us run around, we would do that. And I remember being a little kid, and there was one show that had a magic thing in a big box that would
Yeah.
disappear. I remember that. I remember really well.
The
And my
hands
dad would
that moved
never tell
around.
us how they did that. It's so frustrating. We're like, we've seen it 1,000 times. Just explain it.
Tell me how it
Um,
works. Yeah.
yeah. So I think my introduction to it, I just was around it all the time. I didn't
Yeah.
know it was not normal.
Yeah, yeah. And both mom and dad, both of you guys have parents that both traveled. Did they meet? David, did your parents meet in Up With People? Is that how they met?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. My mom was PR and my dad was on cast staff.
Okay, okay. And Paul, your parents meet on the road?
Yeah, they did. I'm pretty sure they had separate student casts. Dad traveled in 79, I think, and my mom in 80. My dad went back to finish school and then came back on the road. And then I think he might have been a PR and my mom was on admissions or something like that.
Okay. Okay.
Um, I think that's how they met. Most of the stories they tell were stories when they were co cast manager, assistant cast manager, or cast, like
Yeah.
that's where a lot of the stories come from. So I haven't heard as many from those times, but I think that was
Yeah.
I think those
So
were
so you both grew up in up with people households. Did you did you always think that you would do this thing that they did? Because part of the fun about talking and having lunch with Tim Lane and Ken Lane is like Ken was like, "No, we already did it. I wasn't going to do it." And then I don't know if you got to the point where Phil said if Dave Penny did it, he was cool. I was going to do it. It was okay. So tell me about that, Paul. Tell me, did you kind of always figure you might do this?
I mean, I definitely, I think I just had a sense when I was younger that I wanted this international experience and I wanted it to be meaningful because that was what I knew. Like that was
Right.
we moved. So my parents left Up with People in 94. I was 7, I think. And we moved to South Dakota and there were like 2 alumni there. Or like maybe a few more, but so I wasn't really around it later. But I had always people were coming through and visiting, and the connections that my parents had with those people were obviously really strong. And a lot of them knew me, and I called a lot of them uncle or aunt. And
Mm,
so I knew I wanted something like that. I didn't think it'd be Up with People specifically because when I was old enough to really think about it, Up with People had closed in 2000, and I was in
oh,
middle school. So I was like, well, it's gone. I won't do that. I also wasn't necessarily. I became a dance captain Up with People eventually, but I didn't think I wasn't like dancing a bunch at home or anything. So I thought, oh, that's probably not the way I'm going to do it. I'll probably study abroad in a more traditional way or something. Um, so yeah, I think I didn't really.
it
I knew I
wasn't it wasn't like an urging by your parents to say you should do up with people, you should do up with people. This is a path for you necessarily.
definitely not. But it was always just so they never urged me to do it, but it was I don't know how to explain. It was like so obviously beneficial to have the kind of friendships they had and the kind of experience they had had interculturally was
Hmm.
it was cool. I mean, we were in South Dakota and my parents had been all over the world and they had these friends from everywhere and they knew when things would come on the news, my dad would be like, ah, yeah, Rome, I know this about it. And like they were
Yeah,
there, I thought that was so cool.
as
So I wanted
compared to just a book. Yeah,
yeah. So that like the cool factor it encouraged me to
yeah,
travel, but it
yeah.
wasn't like, nope, you're gonna do it.
Going to do up with people. Dave, what about you? What did you think growing up?
I I think I always thought I was going to do it.
Okay.
I liked, uh, yeah, I think I always thought I was going to do it. We, uh, when my dad left Up with People in the mid 90s, a couple of years later, we moved to Vermont from Colorado.
That's right. I
Um,
remember that. Yeah.
uh, we didn't talk about Up with People very often in the household. I think after my dad left, it was just not a topic of conversation
Yeah.
for years.
Yeah.
I remember we went and saw a show in Vermont at some point. I must have been a senior in high school. Um, and it was in some school gym or something. And
We performed in a lot of school gyms.
it
Don't say it
wasn't the
like
most,
that.
yeah, it wasn't the most like impressive show I'd ever been to. But yeah, I don't think that swayed me. But I think the idea of it, like what Paul said, like always having our parents had friends all over the world and they talked to people all over the world and we got Christmas cards from Belgium and
Yeah.
Japan and we hear stories of Hero and
Yeah.
Leonardo and all these people all over and we had them stay at our houses and stuff and so it was just like this is the entryway to this incredible um globe I guess I think it's the make places people
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
phrase that
you hear about a place
ubiquitous
and
up
now
with.
you're like, oh, I know somebody there. So all of a sudden you're paying big attention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I thought I was just gonna always do that. So I kind of had to plan. I was like, all right, I'm gonna go to college for 2 years, and then I'm gonna go travel. And then my freshman year of college, Up with People closed.
Well, okay.
And so I was like, oh, I need a new plan. Um, and then yeah, and I was teaching high school in Denver, and I went. I wasn't really happy with my school, and I thought, and Up with People was reopening or had reopened, and um, I was hoping, like, I didn't know much, like, I didn't really know anything about Up with People. I just knew they worked with schools and that kind of thing, and so I was like, oh, maybe Tim Lane, he's working with Up with People again. Maybe he can get me in connection, like he knows somebody at a high school, and I can get another new job and not work where I'm working.
Oh, that's
So I
interesting.
volunteered at the office in Denver one summer, and right before staging, I had not found a new job, and I didn't want to go back to the school I was at. And Tim and Eduardo kind of talked me into
Interview.
joining late and joining up with the cast. And
That's That's super interesting. So Paul, I don't know if you remember this, but um I in 2009 when you guys were in Mexico, I think that's the first time I met you because that year Up with People had some time of kind of a contest. And as a cast rep, I had won something. I don't remember what, why, or how, but we were out at the pyramids and it was crowded on the bus. And that's when I knew Leslie a little bit because of being from Tucson or whatever, but I think that's the first time I met you. And Dave, I know we've met. I can't remember exactly when, why, or where, but your father was the one that I was telling Phil this, his dad was the head of admissions at the time, but your dad was the final interview, the second interview for me. And and so to see the years is just fun for me because I was a 1 year travel person and then costumes for a couple of years, a very different experience than those of you that were on the road for a very long time. Um, Dave, how old were you then when you traveled?
I was 24, 25, something like that. I was the oldest male on the road for our cast.
Okay, okay. And Paul, how old were you when you traveled first?
So I left. I had a similar last minute decision to travel because I left halfway through my sophomore year of college. So I would have been, I guess I was 19.
Okay, okay. And then did you come back and finish college when you were no, because you were to work full.
Until I not until I so I did some courses on the road because Up with People had a deal with Florida Southern where you could get credit while you traveled. And
Mhm.
I took it as a staff member. I was the first staff member to take it alongside some of the students, which was a really cool opportunity. So I got credits there. And I didn't finish until after I was all done. So I always tell
Okay.
people I took a semester off for 7 years. And then,
That gap year.
yeah, I took a gap most of a decade. And then I came back and finished. So then I
Okay.
finished at Metro Denver here once I came off the road because I had residency here and everything by that
Okay.
time.
Okay. And Dave, you have one brother, is that right?
Yep,
And did he traveling up with people?
did. Yeah.
Okay.
So well,
Before, after you?
after I did,
Okay.
And during.
Okay.
yeah, I think I helped convince him to do it. And then him and his buddy, who's also legacy, Matt Abusi,
Oh,
um, they were both they're like outdoorsmen type things, and they were both working separately in Alaska. And I
oh
think
wow.
over bonfire, they they made a pact to do it together.
Like a pinky swear?
Yeah, pinky
Because
square.
that's what you do around a bonfire in Alaska.
There might have been some whiskey involved. It was a
Ah,
pact.
I see.
Yeah,
That's
a
the
deal.
rest of the story. So, and
Mhm.
Paul, both of your sisters traveled, correct? Yeah. And did, okay, so Annie's married to an alumni, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And Helen?
Helen is not. No.
Helen is not.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So your wife Leslie traveled with you. And Dave, where did you meet your wife? When did you meet your
I met her here in Denver. We were set up by an alumni, by Jen Moody,
Oh, okay.
who's cast manager on the road at one point for my cast, and she currently works with my wife.
Oh,
And
wow.
she reached out, and Jen loves to do matchmaking, and uh,
It's
she said,
awesome.
I have someone you should meet, yada yada yada,
Oh,
and
that's
the rest
cool.
is history. Yeah.
That's cool. So, okay. So I just one of you had said something, or we both did about the world. I think Paul, you know Adam, my other son. Have you met
Yep.
Adam?
Oh
Dave,
yeah.
have you met Adam? My
I
Caleb's.
haven't met him. I wouldn't say we know each other
So
really
I
well.
had lunch today with an alumni who doesn't get out very much that I met in '78 when I first did costumes, Willis Rebick,
Mm.
and haven't seen him since February of 1978. And Adam came and joined us at lunch. And we talked a little bit about the whole on the road, up with people experience, which Adam thought he was too cool to do back then. And he came to Magdalena when the cast was there. And that's when I met your mom first, Paul, in 2013 or 14. I can't remember. And Adam said now he looks at it and he thinks that you have all done this thing in the world that he wishes he could do. He
Mm.
hasn't done it. And, he keeps talking about hiking the Camino and going and couch surfing. And I said, at this point, Adam, you have a cousin in the Netherlands, you have a cousin in Lisbon, you have just go, close up your house and go. But I think now sometimes he regrets it. So that global opportunity that he sees with Caleb and friends and things like that and the experiences that you shared. So when I was talking to Phil and to Caleb, we talked a little bit about what it is like to not be an alumni. And do you get engrossed into this group? Is it like a high school reunion for a high school you didn't attend? So, Dave, comments from your wife. How has all of that been for her through the years?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to totally speak for her, but I think
No.
that being at a high school reunion that's not your high school is pretty accurate. Because I think she got thrown into the deep end. Um, because and Phil mentioned, well, there's a huge network here in
Yeah.
Denver.
Yeah.
Um, and a large part of our friend group are all up with people.
Yeah.
Right. So, definitely when we started dating and things were getting serious, she met all of the up with people. But shortly thereafter, she went to a gala, and the up with people gala, and she's like, I'm not gonna remember anybody's name, and everybody, like, it was very much like it was kind of it was an intense experience,
Yeah.
and we went to one reunion together, which was very similar,
Yeah.
uh, and I think now she knows. I mean, most of our friend group
Right.
are part of this. So she feels really comfortable with our group of friends
Yeah.
and that kind of stuff. So,
I
um,
I remember
but I think
telling,
it can be super overwhelming. And I
right.
think um, there's a lot more like hugging than I think in a lot of communities. And we would get together for birthday parties, and it's like, all right, if it's Paul's birthday party, everyone's going to go around the table and say something, a memory of Paul or something like that. She's like, this doesn't happen outside of this group. This is that was a specific memory, actually.
That's funny.
She's like, every time we go and have a big dinner, and this was kind of early on in the relationship, we have to do something. It's like we're all sharing and we're all doing these things, and it's everything's like a educational workshop or like,
It's
You were
funny to
you were a
think
little
of.
fresher off the road back then, I think.
I after the 5-year reunion that Caleb went to, we talked about the people that came to the reunion and those who didn't. And I remember him saying something, I hope I'm not, broadcasting something I shouldn't say, that some of his closest friends from the road were not there. And I said, well, what you're going to learn through the years, in my opinion, is that the relationships change. And that is evidenced by the fact that, you know, getting to know Phil because of, and is it Jared, is he the one that also sometimes hangs out with you of the Shelster group? I can't remember which
Yeah,
Shelster it is.
yeah,
Yeah.
it'd be Jared.
Which is, um, and and I said, you're going to learn over time that the relationships change. And as the years go by, you create new memories. And the memories are now what you've been doing for the last 5 or 10 or 15 years. And it doesn't mean you don't flash back to Mexico City or Sweden or whatever, because that still happens. But you've lived enough life that there's other memories that you've shared. And it sounds to me, Dave, like that. It doesn't mean you still want the class reunion. Doesn't mean you want the big one with everybody.
Right. But yeah, at this point, it's not, I don't think she feel when we're hanging out, just
Yeah,
we're having a party or something like that. She doesn't feel like, oh, it's the people and
yeah, yeah.
her. We all have,
Them and us, or them and me, or
yeah,
something.
like
Yeah,
9, 10 years of memories together.
yeah, yeah. So, and I know Paul, you and Leslie have one little girl,
Mhm.
and Dave, you guys are expecting. Is this your first?
It's our first. We're expecting within less than a month is our due date.
Wow.
So
And
we're
are you sharing? Do we know if this is a boy or a girl? I don't want to cross any
girl.
boundaries if you're not sure.
No, yeah, it's a girl. We don't have a name for her
Okay.
yet. But it is a girl, and yeah, we're
Congratulations.
very deep in the getting everything ready to make sure we
In
have it.
in that
So
mode,
we are
huh?
prepared.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, fun. I admire and I watch vicariously, and how you guys all seem to be able to still do the thing, get together, include the kids, don't include the kids, put this one to bed, the gatherings and stuff that you do, and keep the relationships close as your families grow, which is really nice that you all can do that. For the first 20 years after I traveled, I was living in a town in Ohio where we were the only I was the only alumni. So it was very, very, very different. Um, Dave, is there a
Yeah.
place that you went when you were on the road that you absolutely want to go back to, or a place that you went that you could care less if you ever go back to?
I was listening. It's because I was listening to the podcast before. I think, and Phil talked about the Philippines and what we were able to do when we were in the Philippines, and I think that was a very different trip. When we would go to Asia and a lot of those um, and when we were on the road, we'd stay in places like we were in Manila for what, 3 weeks, a month? Yeah,
Yeah.
just in Manila, with the same
Wow.
family, and we were at the same community service site for a month.
Wow.
So Phil and I were working at this one place, and it was a community, and we were there 5 days a week.
Wow.
We went to Thailand. We were in a city for 2 weeks in Thailand. Um, and so I think those places were really special because of the service aspect we got to do.
Hmm.
Um, and so I want to go back, but it will be a very different experience.
To go
Um,
back as an adult on vacation potentially or something and see. Yeah.
right. Yeah, like Manila doesn't necessarily have a lot of draw for me as a city for a vacation, but I have like a huge love for Manila. My host family in Manila is incredible, and I've kept in touch with them.
That's
And yeah, I would love to go there, but the idea of like bringing someone and showing like my wife
yeah.
Manila, she won't have the same experiences as I would, as I have there,
Right.
and the same connection. So I think, um, like
Yeah.
that. I think Thailand. I would love to go back to Thailand. I'd love to go back to the Philippines and enjoy some of that. But I know, it would be so very different. Uh,
I wonder whether generationally I think about this because I was the bicentennial and then in Mexico, but it was when everything was paper and you had to write letters and the keeping in touch was a very different thing. So when Caleb and I were back in Europe in 2015 and we stayed with his host family in Rome, and then he and Jessica, when they were there for their honeymoon, they spent the day with them again. And I don't know that without this kind of technology that we have right now, if that would have happened.
yeah, my wife and I were um, coming back this summer. We had the opportunity to go to Bali via her work, which was great. And then on the way back, we stayed 2 nights in Taiwan, in Taipei. And so I reached out. We had been in Taipei, and I reached out to a host brother who I hadn't talked to in 16 years. And he met
Wow.
up with us one night and took us to a night market, and um, he's
Wow.
doing great. And it was amazing to get to spend that time with him. And he's like, "Why did you look me up?" I was like, "Well, I was coming to Taipei. I
Why
thought I
not?
might, why not, right?" I shot a message out into Facebook land, and
That's cool.
and it was wonderful. It was awesome, and it was cool to be able to share that
Yeah,
um, with my wife. And so that's a very special thing that we.
that you are able to do. Yeah.
Mhm.
Paul, what about you? A place that you've been that you loved, or a place that
Oh
you,
my God.
you you've had enough of? I think
I
for
have,
Phil, he said the Midwest. Like,
yeah, I have so many thoughts after hearing Dave's stories. I totally can relate to the like the Manila thing in particular, and a lot of places like that where it's like, and that I think that probably is it's not so unique up with people, but it's uh like the way you travel is so different.
right.
It's really affected the way I feel when I go to a place now, and I don't really feel like I've been to a place anymore if I haven't been in someone's house and eaten a meal with like a local person. And that's kind of how I feel about this. Like if I went back to Manila, it'd be nice because I would have my host family, but like, would I go eat in these slums with these kids again? Like it
Right.
just would be different. But I would, that experience was so unique. I would say like, if I could step back into those and those lessons, in Manila and the slums in particular, that would be really significant. And it feels like Dave said, like that was probably a once in a lifetime opportunity
Yeah.
to have it exactly in that way. So that was pretty special. I mean, there's thousands of places I'd go back to.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
or
to be
maybe a literal thousand, honestly. But like, uh,
I will
I,
say,
yeah,
Paul, during your student semester, we spent a good amount of time in Iowa in the
yeah,
winter.
that's enough. Yeah.
I'd go back to Iowa not in the winter.
It's pretty
Um,
humid, not in the winter.
That's funny. That's
I,
and in 75 when I interviewed, it was Ohio.
Yeah.
And that the song Saturday Night in Toledo, Ohio, I spent a week there one day. Like cast members were like, here we
Yeah.
are. And for me, that was Texas. How big
Yeah.
is Texas? Way too big. Way too many cities.
We spent a lot of time in Texas, my student tour too. I do kind of remember being like, this is a lot of Texas.
This is a lot of Texas. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
cool. Texas is a great place, but I was like, this is a lot of Texas.
yeah, yeah,
And, that was a long time ago. I'm sure I'd like to go back. But I do remember being so excited to travel. I'm sure this is probably such a common up with people's student experience. In fact, I know it is. You're so excited to travel, and then your tour like is announced, and it's like where you're from, and you're like, oh my God, are you serious? But
right.
then you have this amazing experience going through a place like that, anyways. But I
Yeah,
totally feel that too.
yeah.
But
I
yeah, I loved so many places,
I
and
think that we, during the bicentennial year, and both of you had parents that were involved, well, no, Paul, yours were after. It was the United States and a lot of small towns in the United States, but I wouldn't have known about Up With People if they hadn't done small towns in the United States,
yeah,
because those groups of 150 were divided into 50 to hit little towns. And so it wasn't just 75C, it was C1, C2, C3. And that's how I learned about the organization. And literally, you guys, again, in an interview Caleb did with me, I was a finalist for a Navy ROTC scholarship. And I just quit writing about it and went Up With People. It's like entirely, it was as if the Navy just went away and disappeared forever, and I went, that wouldn't have happened if they hadn't come to small towns. So when I drive through or drive across the country now, no matter what town I go into, I think, okay, people live here for a reason.
mhm,
They make lives here for a reason. There's probably something unique about this place and special for them, and that's why they live here, that kind of a thing.
yeah,
And I don't know that I would have had that feeling. It,
yeah. Leslie and I always joke about that with like someone who's like, "Oh, I've been to Belgium," and Leslie and I was like, "Yeah, but I bet they don't know anything about Mole, Belgium." Like some random small town.
small town that
Like,
they've,
oh, sure. Oh, Brussels?
yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, yeah. We've been to the
You
Grand
tell me
Place.
about
Yeah,
Mole. Yeah, tell me about Mole. But yeah, same thing in the Midwest. Like you get to experience a lot of
yeah, Yeah.
reality. A lot of parts of reality most people never visit. Really cool.
I just mentioning Belgium, I'm going to wrap this up. I'm one of the few that has stayed in touch with my Belgian cast member a lot, and because of WhatsApp now and everything. And I was there a couple of years ago, and her son, who Caleb met when he was like 6 or 7, because he spent a month there in Belgium with my friends. Um, his wife works in the ecological department for the city of Brussels about updating buildings. And so my brother and I are going to interview for our podcast about real estate, talking about what they do in other countries and what the laws are to make things come up to date. And that's all because of Up with People. That's because of a contact of a son, your age bracket. You know what I mean? Who's married to someone who does this thing. It's just it's and again, would never have known that if there was letter writing or collect phone calls, to be made. So anyway, well, thank you guys. I appreciate it. I laugh at the idea that I wanted all four of you at once and how hard it is to get your lives together from the perspective of no, this kid's going here, this one's doing this, I have this, I have this. And I appreciate you making the time to to do this. Any parting words from either of you before we go?
Part
Go
of our
travel?
have some deep philosophical.
Yeah, yeah, something like that. Like go see the world. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think I stole this from my dad, but I used to end cast meetings with it. Be safe, be smart, change the world.
That's good. Be safe, be smart, change the world. That's awesome.
I'd, I'd say, I'd say it really is true that like the Up with People idea, like the gifts we all got from the road, from travel, really does start after Up with People.
Mm,
Uh, so like this is as much a reminder to me as it is to anyone listening that like that idea, building bridges with people, like that's not over. It's far from over. So
right. We need it now more than ever.
yeah,
Yeah.
that adventure continues and it's really worthy. So
And
that's
I
all.
can quote a million Up with People songs to that effect. And I always think about the one-to-one and changing the world, right? Because one person at a time, whatever we do affects somebody's life. So, all right, I'm going to hit stop, you guys. Thank you so much for your time this evening. And I'll cut us off and then say goodbye.
Thanks, Donna.